Welcome to our pod, and by that I mean on Wednesdays we read. I'm Hannah.
I'm Laura.
And we are two best friends who usually do a deep dive into a new book series, one book at a time. But today we are finishing up Intermission, guys.
I'm sad it's over.
I know. I love it so much. I got the second book today in the mail because I need more Quenby Olson and her marvelous dragons in my life.
I knew I was going to love the book like before I even read it. So I just bought both of them right off the bat because I was
so
like,
good.
It's a given that I'm going to love this. Spoiler, non-spoiler, I did love it. And if I didn't have to read like 1,000 pages, I would have started.
I know the Fonda Lee of it all really dragged us down. But
I mean, I'll just say like the assigned reading, the homework is very enjoyable.
Yes.
I'm enjoying Fonda Lee's book. That's not what I'm not complaining about that. I'm just saying it's a lot to throw in another book when I'm trying to get something read quickly.
That is very fair of you. I do not. Yeah, I started the Fonda Lee book today, and obviously we're talking about that next week. It's next week. We're on indie intermission, but
exactly. Get back to our indie mission.
But I adored this book so much. It was such a delight.
The book we're talking about also is Miss Percy's Pocket Guide to the Care and Keeping of the Care and Feeding of British Dragons by Quenby Olson.
I love it so much. It's the best, and thank you for saying that.
Little cozy fantasy.
A beautiful little cozy fantasy that deals with themes of like older adults coming into their own and finding out that the world isn't like ending just because they're 40. And isn't that a lesson we all need to learn? Like,
I mean, there's so much to be taken away from the themes in this that that our journeys are not over at a certain age, that we can continue to grow and love ourselves as we get older and at the stage that we're in. I love that whole aspect of it. And like not giving up on love. I think that is also something that you could take away from this book too, because Miss Percy kind of thought that wasn't going to be an option for her, and she finds that she does have an option for romance.
And romance on her terms. It's like more mature. And then, like, I think that there's a lot to be said in this book where you have like a young romance that's like a hot mess. And then like this very mature romance between two people who become friends and who become confidants. And then Miss Percy decides that she'd like to pursue something romantic with this person. Like, I think that that's a wonderful way to look at things. And like, yes, the romances we had in our 20s are like full of like, oh my gosh, they're so gorgeous and it's so amazing. But like, there's something to be said about a mature romance and coming into it later in life and
I think
finding your person.
Olson does such a great job of making things that we typically don't consider to be attractive or beautiful in like our everyday lives really attractive. And so aging seems not quite so bad when we can look forward to things and if we can go on adventures and find love and find ourselves and learn and do all these things. Because I think so often we consider romance and learning and traveling and all these things for the youth.
Right.
That is for the youth of the world and no one else. Like they are the ones that get to be the main characters. They are the ones that get to have the romance. And it's so refreshing to have this beautifully written, fun book.
Yeah.
Kind of flips that on its head.
Well, and surprise to everyone who hasn't looked at the name of the episode, we have an interview with Quenby coming in, 5 minutes or so after we kind of wrap up our little discussion.
After we shut up.
After we shut up and we finally let you get to the good stuff.
We get to the good stuff.
But we kind of talk about with her, and something I found is like this book also kind of talks about like how usually in stories it's strong-headed young people who are making decisions, and it's like, isn't that heroic that they're shirking the responsibilities of society? And it's like, yes, that can be heroic and it can be damaging. Like those are two things that can be true, and it's depending on the person and depending on how they act with what they're doing and depending on if they're ready to live with the consequences. And like it feels like some of the younger characters in these books is like, oh, with Hawthorne, he didn't think he'd be the villain. And it's like, but he is, because he's 20 and he's younger and he's rash and he's making these decisions. And like, because he's not thinking through them, it's not heroic, even though it could have been in another story. Right. And so I just find that like so fascinating that we just have this like 40-year-old woman who may have been like the villain in another book where it's like, oh, she's hoarding this dragon's eggs that's rightfully someone else's and she won't let it go. And it's like, no, in this story, that's not the case. This is like, this is what she's supposed to be doing. And she's coming at it with respect and maturity. And the other two are just not. So I felt that very specific passage where Belinda is like, this is our adventure and we're doing this. And I was like, oh my gosh, like in another story, she's right. Like she's not wrong. And so it's just interesting to kind of see, like you said, the way Olson can turn things on their head and make something beautiful. So this book is so good.
I honestly, when we were speaking with Quenby, I got a little emotional hearing how some of this came to be and some of the thought processes behind some of the characters and some of the choices that are made in the book. And I just think that it is a cozy fantasy and it is a fun book, but honestly, listeners, it is so much deeper than that. And I think that if you have not read it yet, you definitely need to give it a chance, because it really connects with you as a reader, no matter like what situation you're in. And I think that it's just a wonderful book, and so many props to Quenby for writing this.
Right. And I think that that's something to be said about cozy fantasy, where I think too many people only know the surface of what cozy fantasy is, where it's like, it's delightful, it's low stakes, it's this and that. And it's like, yeah, but it can still have deep emotional ties to a narrative and a story. And I think like Quenby did such an amazing job of like tying those things. And like, you're about to hear the interview, but like she gets emotional. I got emotional, and like the questions, you can tell she's thought through a lot of these choices. And like, I credit her fully. I'm so glad we got to read this book and talk about it. So yeah, thank you. Laura, do you have any final thoughts?
I just hope everyone has read the book and reviewed it, and that you enjoy the interview.
Without further ado, here you guys go. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And today on the pod, we have the wonderful Quenby Olson.
Hi.
Hi, here to talk about Miss Percy's Pocket Guide to the Care and Feeding of British Dragons. Quen, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. Yes, I did.
Well, as you know, your book was heavily voted for in our Intermission bracket system, the perfect way to pick our next read. But can you tell everyone a little bit about this book and what made you write it?
Miss Percy, yes, Miss Percy's Pocket Guide to the Care and Feeding of British Dragons is a cozy fantasy. I would say it's kind of like a light Jane Austen story with fantasy and small dragons mixed in. I wrote it, I started writing it at the beginning of the pandemic, because when else do you really, really need to work on a cozy story? And I wrote it very quickly. I think it only took me about 3-4 months to get the entire thing written. And I had wanted, though, for years to write a Jane Austen Regency type book with fantasy elements, because that's not something I had found a lot of. And then all of a sudden the idea popped into my head when I was in the shower, because of course all good ideas come to you in the shower. Of course. And it spooled out in my head, and then I just started writing, and it came very, very quickly.
That's awesome. This is a long book too, so I'm impressed that you were able to write it in such a short amount of time, and also that it's so quippy and smart and lovely. Like, if you gave me 4 months to write something, I'd have like a paragraph, and it would be incredible.
Well, I hate to say it helped that it was the pandemic, because that's like, yay, pandemic. No, there was nothing to do. I mean, everything was closed. I couldn't take my kids anywhere. It was, let's sit at home and watch the same shows on Netflix over and over. It was what else was there? Libraries were closed, schools were closed, everything. So it was, a lot of it was just channeling all of my anxiety and everything into this book.
Well, and something I love about you writing it during that time is that this is such a hopeful and positive book. And that was such a difficult time for so many people. And it's amazing that you were able to kind of get your creative juices flowing and to turn something positive and hopeful out of that. So I'm very impressed that that was when you wrote this book.
It also came at a time when my health wasn't great. Because after I had my last baby, I had some health issues, was diagnosed with some different autoimmune disorders. And so there was a bit of a panic. I know in Miss Percy, she has that feeling that her life is any chance of adventure is over. And I had that feeling a bit where it was, I'm in my 40s now and I don't feel well a lot of the time, and this is it. I'm in this house and this is where I will always be. I will not be able to go on trips or adventures because I will feel bad. And so it was kind of this wish fulfillment was writing this story. I'm going to try not to sound teary while I do this, but it was very much a wish fulfillment of, here's me kind of living vicariously through this woman who's feels trapped, and then gets to go and have this wonderful adventure when she thinks she's not going to be able to anymore.
Well, and I think that definitely shines through in this novel, just with how hopeful Miss Percy is, and the fact that there are so many essences of she thinks the life has passed her by. And I don't think that there are a lot of examples out there in literature of a 40-year-old woman who has that feeling of being stuck. And so it's a very wonderful book that you were able to kind of distill your own feelings into this person and have her shine forth in caring for a tiny dragon and kind of finding her own way with that. So
and Miss Percy's journey of gaining some more value in herself is so beautiful too, because she starts off the novel thinking, I'm only good at this. I can only take care of my sister's kids, this kind of thing. And like you said, as she goes along, she realizes that, she's totally worthy of having adventures and doing things. And that why shouldn't she be the one to go on an adventure and have a dragon and write a book? So I think that's really amazing that you were able to channel your own situation into Miss Percy and make it so amazing.
Thank you.
You're going to have a lot of us just throwing compliments at you.
We really love this book.
Uncomfortable.
I'm sitting, it does. It does. It's that, I don't know if it's a generational thing or if it's just, a personality where it's people compliment you and you're like, if I say thank you, I acknowledge that you're right. And it makes me sound, pretentious and oh yes, of course I'm wonderful. Of course, so no, but it's speaking of the age thing, in fantasy and obviously sci-fi too, with Star Wars, it's always, the chosen one always seems to be, the 16-year-old Eragon, all of those stories. It's oh gosh, not another one, not another 15-year-old who has to save the world.
Right.
And there are stories out there that have that trope that are fantastic and truly foundational for fantasy and everything, but it's nice to have some variety and to feel okay, maybe I can, start my life and my living at 40, 50, etc. I don't have to be a 15-year-old farm boy with my aunt and uncle just burnt to a crisp, to go and have an adventure.
Right.
Absolutely. And I think that readers Hannah and I love this book. And I know I can't speak for Hannah, but I know myself, it's something that we can see that I can see in myself. You're not just stuck right here. There's so much time to do things and to grow. And even at 30 or 40 or 50, you don't have to have your life plan set. You can do all these other things. So hopefully I will find a dragon at some point and I'll be able to go on adventures.
I have to ask, was Fitzwilliam a little nod to Pride and Prejudice? Because
yes.
Okay.
Yes. Absolutely.
Because I remember finding out Fitzwilliam was Darcy's first name and being devastated that he had such a terrible first name when I was a child. Because
I just mentioned another terrible first name though, Claude. At the end of the book, when she says, "Is it okay if I call you Claude now?" I'm like, Claude? What?
Laura did have a moment of, did we know his first name was Claude before we bought into this romance?
No, that is the first I reveal it. I actually took that. It's from, there's the miniseries Lost in Austen. I don't know if you've heard of that, where yes, and she time travels back, and they gave that, I think that was Mr. Bennet's first name. They gave him the name Claude.
Oh,
because he says something that his name is Claude, and she's kind of makes this face like, "Ew, your name is Claude." Like, Claude, of course it's Claude, you know. And I thought, okay, I've got to use this name, this completely like Claude that kind of like catches you off guard a little bit.
your name is Claude. Yeah, and I think that that's such a thing of when you're reading Austen later on in life, where you find out that like, oh, people just took other surnames and made them people's first names, and it's like, why would you do that? Why would you be? Because like, I read a continuation on one of the Pride and Prejudice where they named their first son Bennett, and I was like, well, thank God her name was Bennett, because at least that sounds a little normal. But
so obviously Jane Austen was an influence for you, but what are some other influences in your writing?
I mean, I have a good many. I actually want to shout out Elizabeth Gaskell, who I think some people don't know as much, who wrote North and South and Wives and Daughters and Cranford. Cranford was a big influence for Miss Percy, because if you know anything about Cranford, it's the town that has all these older ladies in it who kind of run and manage the town. And her writing has I think, more comedic slant in some cases, even than Austen, and has a little bit more of that snarkier wit. So I used that, was a big influence. Pratchett and Neil Gaiman, like Good Omens, was an influence. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where it just jumps around. Even Princess Bride, there were things that I lifted from.
I feel like I could talk to you for like hours about old school literature, because Wives and Daughters, I remember watching that show, that like TV series growing up. It was hugely influential on me.
And I'm gonna have such similar reading taste.
But it actually it reminds me of like the fact that, and this is something Miss Percy, you have like the sister character and the daughter character who are much more biting, and I feel like that's definitely a Wives and Daughters kind of tale, where you have these two people who are very established in what you should and shouldn't do. And I definitely wanted to talk a little bit about like your feelings on the Belinda character, who almost seems like in another story she could have been the heroine, where it's like, I am forging out on my own, I'm shirking the duties and responsibilities of Old English stuff, but she's doing it in a very hypocritical and judgmental way of everyone else around her, and she doesn't have like the forethought to make herself a better person through all of this. She almost lets herself be bitter. So like, what kind of inspired you to make Belinda as she was, and like what were some difficulties in creating her character and some like fun things in creating her character?
Belinda was fun because I feel like in another book she would have been the heroine, because she is very lovely and charming and she's younger. You know, this would have been the heroine of a different book. In this one, she's very, is more self-centered, and she has that lack of wisdom that comes with youth in some cases. And it was fun shaping that kind of a character into a more villainous role, and she does become more villainous as the series goes along. So it was just interesting seeing that play by play, because usually a character like Mildred or Mrs. Babington or someone, they would have been the side supporting characters around someone like Belinda, and so to kind of flip that was a lot of fun to do that, to have it be, oh, Belinda's the side character, she's the supporting character, she's the one that's kind of helping move the plot along for Mildred to then have, her main character shenanigans. So
yeah, that never felt more intentional than the scene where she's talking to her and she's like, this is my story. Like, I feel like there's a certain amount of delusion that comes in Belinda and Hawthorne, where they are the main characters in their own story. And so they're sitting there being like, you're supposed to go away now. You're this evil person who's keeping us from our rightful like place and our love and all this stuff. And it was just fun to kind of see that turned on its head. Like you're right. This is a very cozy fantasy, but it also has like a lot of like shirking of the norms that I just find so enjoyable.
I love doing that. I loved kind of flipping everything and having, the people that in a lot of more period works, classic works, you see, someone who would be 40 years old would be kind of written off. You've not had children at this point. You're not married at this point. So you have not fulfilled your duties as a woman at this point. So we're going to move on to the next generation because we're done with you. So it was nice seeing that kind of going to Belinda, where it's like, well, no, just because you're young and lovely and marriageable age doesn't mean this story is about you. So that might be my own middle-age bitterness coming through, but
they can, if someone has an issue with it, they can read all the millions of other stories that have an early girl in their 20s being like, I'm so independent and amazing.
I love that you said it was easy to write Belinda as a villainous character, because I hated Belinda so much. I could just see myself going to town like, she did this and then she did this.
But there's also
awful.
You did such a good job of like showing why she thinks she's the main character, but then there's like one of the scenes, one of the openers is someone talking about how she set someone else's hair on fire, I believe.
Yes.
Like, and you're like, oh, she's terrible, she's just the worst.
Yes.
Like,
yes, it was in my head a little bit. I'm referring to more classic fiction now. There's in A Little Princess, you have the kind of villainous girl at the school who terrorizes Ermengarde and Sarah, the little princess. And I always think of her. There's the scene in the one Little Princess movie where she's like dipping the girl's hair in ink and all of that. And that was kind of the inspiration for Belinda, is that I'm just going to go and just ruin everyone's day. And I'm going to destroy this girl's hair and I'm just going to tear everyone down.
What a perfect villain to think of, because I also I immediately knew you were talking about the ink scene, but there's also the scene where she's like walking across Sarah's clean floors in her dusty shoes.
Oh goodness, yes.
And it's like, I watched that movie as an adult and I was like, oh my gosh, this like older woman is terrible. Like this girl's father just died and she sticks her up in an attic and it's just like this horrendous, yes, you have the villainy in women in movies is so much more interesting when you look at the olden time and kind of the subterfuge that happens. So you did well with Belinda showing all of that.
Can we talk about the villain that is Hawthorne though? And are we supposed to kind of try and sympathize with him because of his backstory? Because it's difficult. It's difficult.
It's
and he's got a lot of attitude too, which I hate that smugness.
It's, it's really, okay, I'm going to say something now. I can't talk too much about Mr. Hawthorne, I think, without giving some story arc things away for the future books, but I will say that you might come to sympathize with him more later, because I kind of did like a little red herring thing where his chapter starts with the, if he'd known he was going to be the villain of the piece, blah, blah, blah. And he's, it's basically, he came from like not a great background either, so it was interesting playing with that like, will he become a villain just because of his roots, or will he be able to kind of rise above that? So that's kind of his own story arc, and how much is he being a villain on his own, and maybe how much is Belinda kind of using him. So I think I think if you look at maybe how villainous Mr. Hawthorne was before he met Belinda and after Belinda, you might kind of get an idea of where his trajectory might go.
So we're getting a little nature versus nurture here.
Oh my God. It's just supposed to be a cozy little fantasy. I mean, it's not like a whole essay on the human condition, but
Belinda is nurturing some villainous.
So Laura and I are kind of new to like fantasy, like discussing fantasy as a genre and the way we do after doing like seasons of looking at specific fantasy series. So like, I know you described this as cozy fantasy. We've been describing it as cozy fantasy, but like, what are your thoughts on that genre and working within it? And like, was that your intent setting out, or did you kind of find out that this was like a perfect cozy fantasy after the fact? Or
I apparently found out that it was cozy fantasy after the fact. I wrote something that I just thought was going to be this fun little Jane Austen thing, like Emma with fantasy, kind of. And cozy fantasy, which, I mean, it already existed with things like Howl's Moving Castle and some of like the Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking. It was not something that, you know, was not unheard of. I don't think it really had the term cozy fantasy too much. I wrote Miss Percy, and then I published that in the fall of 2021. And then I'd say about 6 months later, there was this tiny book you may have heard of called Legends and Lattes that came out.
I love that one.
And then all of a sudden, I noticed that as soon as that came out and started to explode, that sales of my book started to rise. Mm-hmm. Because I would notice people would go, oh, I just read Legends and Lattes. What is this cozy fantasy I've been hearing about? Or do you know of any other books that are like this? And then that was when Miss Percy started to kind of get lumped in with that, you know, oh, this is cozy fantasy. And then I was like, yeah, okay. Hey, look at this cozy fantasy book I wrote, you know. So I didn't write it with the intention of it, I'm going to hop onto the cozy fantasy train, because I didn't really know there was one or was going to be one. I think it was, I was extraordinarily fortunate that I wrote something that was part of a genre that was beginning to explode before anyone had really put a match to the fuse. So
I think cozy fantasy has exploded with like book talk and everything, because people are like discussing genres a lot more. And when you have like an open discussion, people are like, well, what is this? Like, we're all talking about it and we all know what it is, but what's the word for it? So,
and it's at such a time when everybody just wants a feel good fantasy book. So I think that's probably why people have attached themselves to cozy fantasy so much, because we need to feel good.
Oh, I think I connect cozy fantasy a lot with the romance genre, because you get a lot of people who read romance, historical romance and things, because it will have that guaranteed happily ever after. So you know that I'm going to read this and there's hope to it. I'm going to be satisfied that these characters are going to turn out okay. They're not going to die. And I can see the connection between that and cozy fantasy, that, okay, I'm going to read this fantasy book and, you know, the characters are not going to die. There's not going to be some huge war and half of the inhabitants of the city are going to be wiped out. I'm not going to have to watch, you know, a red wedding type scene occur. You know, it's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. And I think it gives you that same feeling that romance gives a lot of people, where I can read this, I can enjoy the characters, enjoy the ride, and know that things will work out, and not have that stress of, oh gosh, am I going to start chapter 7 and my main character's now dead?
Right. Well, and I think that these books kind of like saying, when we all grow up, like you said you're in your 40s, I'm in like my early 30s, but like I remember when I was growing up, like the library, going in and finding the small young adult section that they did have at the time, because it wasn't like a thing. But I remember reading like A Great and Terrible Beauty by Libba Bray, or like all these other books that were just like fun little romps of a book that had their own fantasy elements and fantastical elements. And it's just like, oh yeah, why wouldn't we want that same feeling in our adulthood?
Yes.
And a lot of fantasies weren't catering to that. So I think cozy fantasy is like a good way to be like, oh no, this is exactly what you felt like as a child reading fantasy, which was a different type of fantasy than these like high fantasy novels.
I know there's that, oh gosh, I can't think of the quote. I'm terrible at remembering quotes with my old lady brain now. Isn't there like, there's a C.S. Lewis quote where he's like writing to one of his kids, where it's something like, you know, you'll grow up and then you'll appreciate the children's stories and the kids' things and the fairy tales again. Once you grow up, you know, you'll get past that, oh, this is for kids, and then you'll come back to it and realize what worth there is in it.
And yeah, that's so true. So I do want to ask, because like I know we've talked about some of our favorite villainous characters, but what was your favorite character to write about? Like, who did you have the most enjoyment with?
Mrs. Babington.
Oh, she's amazing.
I love her. She's so fun. And I don't know why, I really just appreciated that the other characters also just were blatantly calling out how awesome she was. They're, like, even the kids, they're like, she's the best. We love Mrs. Babington.
I mean, she's basically, it makes me think of when my kids always want to go to grandma and grandpa's house, because we want to go to grandma's house because, she'll bake cupcakes with us, and then she'll get out the toys, and then we'll manage. They even want to do chores when they go to her house. Like, what is this? What power does she have? That my kids are like, can we mop your floors, grandma? And it's like, okay, this is Mrs. Babington, is that quintessential character that just somehow, like a Pied Piper, can lead the kids to, let's do all these things, let's play bingo. Yes, grandma, let's play bingo. We don't want Nintendo, we want bingo. And just kind of, and I like Mrs. Babington just being on top of things, just that steady assurance that I'm just going to roll up my sleeves and get things done.
Right.
I also such a supportive character too, where the other characters do things and she's like, I'm here for you, I'll help you, let's do it.
Yeah.
Yes.
I also I have the same energy as Miss Babington when I'm traveling, because I too need all the snacks just in case. Like if it's a 2-hour drive, I'm like, what if we get deserted? Like you need like an entire box of popcorn. Like you can't just survive without it. So she and I have the same travel energy.
Yes. Yes. I'm like that. Anytime we go somewhere, I'm like, I need like 5 things in my purse to eat. I need a Snickers bar and fruit snacks, because if I don't eat for an hour and a half, I'm going to be miserable. And so I'm just going to pack all this stuff. And are we going to be near where there's food for sale?
I just stopped in and got a sandwich, and I ordered like a veggie sandwich, and I was with my partner, and he was like, oh, Hannah decided she needed vegetables. Like she was getting an upset stomach and she needed vegetables just then, right then. And that's like a specific order. So I'm very much Mrs. Babington. So I also love that she like is so useful. Like I think you have a very keen eye to like make all these characters, like older women, useful, because like she leaves and the vicar falls apart. Like he does not know how to put on tea. He does not know how to feed himself. He's sitting in his own like disgust. And Mrs. Babington's like
wallowing in his own filth.
Right. Yeah. And so you make her so useful and like so lovely. And so like it shows like the resilience of women a lot of the time. And I love that.
Yes. I really did want to have a cast of characters. One thing I did knowingly was I wanted to have a cast of characters that was a majority of women who could get things done, who knew what they were about, and were more middle-aged or older. That like, we've been doing this for years now. We know what we're doing. Come on, don't question us,
Right.
I also do love the character of Mr. Wiggin though, and how he is a champion for other women. Mm-hmm. Like he is all about helping women, helping Miss Percy, pushing her to write the book and to find out more. And I think he's a really great character. And I love the slow burn romance and how you can feel it coming. But there's just a part of me that was just like, every time him and Miss Percy were together, it was like, now kiss. Now kiss.
It's the meme. It's like pushing the Barbie and the Ken doll together. Like, do it.
When she's looking at his forearms, it's like, oh, just kiss already.
I had to put forearms in there. I had to. It was, Mr. Wiggin was great because, like with Mildred, her not being, the classic heroine of a story. She's not young. She's not tremendously gorgeous and all of this. And Mr. Wiggin is, in his heading towards later 40s. His hair is thinning. He's bigger and broader and not in a big muscular, on the cover of a romance novel way, but in a way that a man would be in his mid to later 40s, after, especially with all of Mrs. Babington's cooking. But I wanted that. I wanted these characters that felt very real and that were comfortable in their lives. And I don't want to say imperfect, because then that implies that the younger beautiful characters are perfect. Mm-hmm. They are perfect in their way for their lives and all of that. And I wanted to show that you don't have to be this gorgeous supermodel type character or extraordinarily buff or something like that to lead a fantasy story and to have an adventure.
I did love the fact that he kind of has like, he's barrel chested, because older men are barrel chested. Like that's just, they have a pot belly. Like it just happens. But I also love that, like, you kind of discuss how like even them in their own like Miss Percy, she goes over to visit him and people are like, you're not trying to marry him, right? Because like you can't pop out a kid and he needs someone to pop out a kid. Like you're still kind of tying it to the society at the time. And it's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mr. Wiggin is still an eligible bachelor, even in his 40s,
you know, and in that day and age, you could have easily in your 40s then gone and, you know, courted a 18, 19, 20-year-old woman, and everyone would have thought that was perfectly fine, you know, because you had to marry the younger woman so that she would have time to have children. And,
right. Something I did notice again about like the choices you've made in this novel that I love was that Miss Percy wanted children and recognizes that like that time in her life has now passed. And like, she still gets to have a version of that through Fitz. And she's coming to terms with like, I may not have had my own children, but I have this found child and I raised my sister's children. And I have a unique sense of motherhood. Like what kind of made you make that choice, honestly? Because like a lot of people, if you have like a woman in her 40s, she's going to be someone in a book like, I never wanted kids, but to like have her want kids and have that specific type of grief was very unique.
It's I'm trying to think of how to say this. It's basically it my brain went.
No, and it's a difficult question. So if you're like, that is way too difficult question to like, I'll get back to you later.
I mean, it is basically, I think I didn't want everything into the story to work out in this like, here's Miss Percy's checklist of all the things that she ever wanted in her life, and that somehow at the end she gets all of those things. You know, there are things that we regret that maybe we didn't get a chance to do or that we miss out on. And, you know, in this case, Miss Percy doesn't have her own children. She does miss out on that. She made that choice to take care of her parents, or take care of her father, to take care of her sister's children. So that is something that she will miss. But then she does have, like you said, kind of this, I don't want to say replacement child, that sounds terrible. But with Fitz and all of this, that, oh, wait, there is something in a, say, mothering, caretaking sense that she can still do, that caretaking isn't just having your own child and raising it, that it can be used in some other way, that you can care for a dragon, she can care for her sister's children, there are other ways to use those skills and talents that she has to care for others. It does not have to be just, I popped out some babies and that is how I will use it, you know. If that makes sense.
No, I mean, I asked because I noticed it, and I was like, that's a really unique way to, because I don't think a lot of people would go down that direction, because I think it is a difficult thing to thread, but you did it very expertly. Like it felt perfectly layered in this novel.
Another thing that you do expertly throughout this book is the tone and narration of the book. I'm specifically thinking of a moment where there's a mention of better books would have this, and then in parentheses it says, quiet you. And I adore so many of those moments where the person telling us this story gets a little quippy with us. Were you always intending to kind of write it from that type of point of view?
Yeah, I do. Yes and no, a little bit. I started writing it that way. There was no fudging of trying to find the voice for this story. Like, it was there right away. And there were moments where I thought, well, maybe when I edit or something, I'll pull back and make it sound like other books from this time, you know, from this set in this time period. And then I realized that the more I kind of leaned into it, the faster the writing went and the more fun it was for me. And I thought, you know, I'm just going to have this omniscient narrator who's just kind of messing with us all a little bit and is in control, kind of how there's the narrator in like the Good Omens miniseries where you hear, you know, Frances McDormand kind of telling, and this is kind of that character, just kind of overseeing everything and kind of prodding things along a little bit. Like, well, I'm going to give you this little aside now about things that are happening, you know.
A little bit of
really perfect.
The Miss Whistledown of narrator.
Yes.
Bridgerton. That's amazing. I also adore, like, sometimes the action sequences where it can be kind of scary, you do it in the most like humorous way possible, where you have like Belinda trying to throw a dragon out a window and she just keeps like dive running after Miss Percy and like won't quit. And I just like, it's so funny the way you have the stereo looking at it, because like you feel the ridiculousness in these action scenes where it's like, what is going on right now? Like, can't she just sit in the corner and like calm
Well,
down?
Hannah, you mentioned previously, you're like, this is the most like convoluted action scene ever, and it's taking forever because things are just happening, and then you think they're done, and then there's Belinda again. Like, you're back at what? I thought you gave up.
I always think of action scenes like when you read them in fantasy books, sometimes everyone moves so expertly, like everyone's so well trained. And I'm just thinking, what would happen if you had a regular person in their 40s it's the middle of the night and you've got someone else? None of these people are physically action trained, and they're trying to deal with basically a stressed out cat with wings. This is not going to go well. Nothing is going to go good. I mean, it's all going to be awful and terrible and chaos. And so I thought, well, it has to be that way. You know, this is how it would be if I was trying to chase down a pet. Like, okay, go into your carrier now, you know, and it can breathe fire at me and fly away. This is going to be awful, you know. So
it's the Bridget Jones Diary fight scene where they're like trying to kick each other and they can't get their foot higher than a foot off the ground because they don't know how to kick. Like, it's just a little sad watching them fight.
You mentioned a fire-breathing cat, and I also noticed in the dedication that you dedicated the books to your cat as well. Is Fitz the dragon kind of based on your cat?
Yes, okay. Absolutely. There's no question about that. I had a cat growing up whose name was not Fitz. She because I did flip genders there. She was my first cat. My mom had OCD, so it was very special that she said, okay, you can have a cat. And so when I was 13 years old, we went and I picked out this kitten who was an Angora, so big fuzzball, long dark hair, and was the most pain in the butt cat, just awful for the entire 18 years that she lived. I mean, she was kind of, I loved her to pieces, but she was kind of an idiot. She was like the only cat I knew that she would like just fall off of things and land on her back. You know, it was that kind of a cat where you're like, are you sure you're a cat? You know, and would just, you know, I'm just going to hawk up the hairballs all over. I'm going to bring you a mouse as a prize, but I'm not going to know what to do with it. So here's this live mouse, and it's now going to run around the living room. You know, I'm going to get caught up on this door, and now I can't get down. I'm going to claw everything, every little piece of wood. I'm going to get caught up on the storm door screen. So basically, yes, Fitz was my cat, who was just a menace for almost 2 decades.
That's adorable. I do have to ask, since we've talked a little bit about Austen, what is your favorite Austen novel out of all of them?
Persuasion.
What a good answer. I made Laura read that last year. We make
excellent one.
We get to assign each other books during our birthday month, and I chose Persuasion.
Neat.
So it's a good option. I did want to ask though, what made you decide to do Miss Percy through like indie publishing?
Mostly, I mean, I was self-published before with other books. So that was my first inclination was, okay, I've done this. I know the process. And secondly, I thought because of the sound of Miss Percy, the voice that I gave it, and the fact that cozy wasn't a thing then, that, you know, there wasn't a ton of Regency with magic type things, I thought no publisher's going to touch this. So I'm just going to release it, because what am I going to do with it? I'm going to send it to publishers and they're going to say, well, we want another Game of Thrones, or we want another, you know, Greek myth retelling, or we want something like this that people are obviously more interested in. And so I self-published it because I thought no one's going to want to read this. It's going to be me. I'll sell like, you know, 150 copies and feel really good about myself, and then just, you know, keep working on it. That was why I went with indie self-publishing. Yes.
And what's your experience been like with like self-publishing, not just Miss Percy, but like throughout your, what kind of led you to down this path instead of trying to do traditional, and how's it been going for you?
I first started self-publishing, goodness gracious, 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago. And I had tried doing the, querying agents and things like that route. And I would get requests for, full manuscripts and things like that, but there was always comments along the lines of, well, we can't market this, we can't do anything with this right now. Your writing's really strong, but we don't have a place for this. Mm-hmm. So then I thought, okay, well, they're telling me my writing is good, so this self-publishing thing seems to be happening, so I'll just throw these books out and see how it goes. And I had no idea what I was doing. Like, I did not go into this with a business plan. I did not go into this with tons of money to spend on ads and various things. I was just, let's throw the books out there and see how they go. And they obviously did not do great, but they did well enough that I kept writing. And I wrote a lot of historical romance for a while, and those did pretty good. And then I started to turn back to fantasy, and it was a risk going back to fantasy because the other fantasy book that I had written, The Half Killed, was probably one of my lowest sellers. And I thought, I'm taking a real gamble here with going back to fantasy. I should keep writing historical romance because that is selling enough that it can pay some bills. And I thought, no, I'm going to give fantasy another try. I'm going to combine the historical romance and the fantasy and see how this goes, this kind of weird madcap comedy mishmash. And it was really just a gamble. It was an absolute gamble. Putting that out there. With all of my books, it's been that way. And this is the first series that has really just gone off.
Well, we're very lucky that you've decided to go down this like path, and we love Miss Percy. Yeah, I need to go look at all your other books. I definitely was scrolling through your website being like, oh, these all look so good. So
well, and Miss Percy specifically has had a lot of traction lately because of Spiffbo.
Yes.
What was that experience like?
It was interesting. I wasn't sure if I was going to do it at first. I had done Spiffbo before, and I had gotten knocked out in the first round. I got a really good review out of it, but I was a whole bunch of other books, and mine was knocked out. And I thought, well, I'll give it another shot. And I threw Miss Percy in, thinking it's going to get knocked out in the first round. It was not knocked out in the first round. Okay, well, it made it to semifinalists. It's going to get knocked out. It won't make it to finalist. And then it made it to finalist. And I'm thinking, okay, well, it's going to be bottom on the chart because it's such an odd voice. Every reviewer is going to read this and be like, what is this crazy crud here? This doesn't sound like a lot of the other books that have done well in Spiffbo. And then it finished with a strong score and did pretty well. It was nerve-wracking in that sense. I didn't think that it would kind of mess with my head as much as it did. I think because when you enter a book in Spiffbo, and if you go far enough to get the public reviews, a lot of the times bloggers and things, they won't post negative reviews, out of courtesy. They'll be like, oh, only post a review your book if it's, 3-4 stars or higher. And with Spiffbo, if they don't like your book and they're going to post a review, they will say, hey, this book didn't work for us. We thought the world building was shoddy, or this and that and the other. And that part was really unnerving, that you're basically putting it out there and saying, okay, well, if you don't like it, you have to tell me. And that was a little freaky and messed with my head a bit. So for the last few weeks, it was a little bit difficult to work and to write because I kept thinking, oh gosh, what if a review drops today and says my book sucks while I'm here trying to write the third edition in this trilogy, and you're telling me the first one, blows. So it was a really odd experience. I don't know if I would ever do it again, at risk of having to mentally deal with that as I did this time.
It's one of those things, like I saw Conan O'Brien in an interview say that he doesn't go online and read anything about himself because he just can't mentally take reading negative things about himself. It just really gets to him. And I was like, that makes complete sense. And that would make complete sense for your writing too, that, you'd be really crushed if you had to read some like really bad stuff about things that you would put so much of yourself into.
Yeah. I try to avoid reviews. I'll look at the rating numbers. Like I'll go on Amazon and be like, oh, look, it's 1,000 rating reviews, but I will not look to see the individual reviews,
right?
Just because it does, for me personally, it really messes with my head. Yeah. And will completely knock me out of writing for a day or so if I get a review that's like, well, I don't know what this author was thinking, and I'll just like question my entire career because somebody from Topeka was like, yeah, well, I don't think it worked. You know?
Everyone's a critic, and you're just sitting there like, I'm trying my best.
There was no red wedding in this at all.
Yeah, like, I was expecting a red wedding. Do you have any advice for people who want to do like self-publishing or who are thinking about like trying to publish their book?
I think for self-publishing, I would say definitely make sure that you have an editor or someone to go through it and fix some of the story things, even if you will have to probably spend some money to do this. So make sure you have someone who will edit, proofread, to clean it up, get decent cover art. Don't just try and throw something together that looks very clearly self-published that it's like, oh, well, because people will immediately dismiss it. Other than that, I think every path is going to be different. Some people will set up a plan where they pour a whole bunch of money into ads. Some people will sign up and do a ton of blog tours and chase down reviewers that way. Some people will do newsletter swaps. So in that case, you really have to do some research and find out what will work best for the little subgenre in which you are writing. If you're doing epic, if you're doing romantic fantasy, urban fantasy, you have to look around and say, okay, what will work? What is my best plan for this type of book?
That is very good advice. And then can you tell us a little bit about the sequel to this book and the third book, if you can give us any small details on what you're working on?
I can. The sequel, which is out already, you can buy it at all fine retailers.
And everyone should be buying it already because this is an amazing book that we love.
Quenby
and
posted
you should get it
on Twitter that her kids have bad teeth. Go buy her book. So.
They need braces, and we are a family of people who our teeth we get cavities. I don't know. You see some people talk about, well, my kids never had cavities. And I'm like, good for you. I mean, we brush, we floss, and my kids' teeth are just like, Mom, I got cavities again. So anyway, please buy my books. Please buy my books because I don't know what is going on with the teeth in our skulls. Anyway, the second book, they go to Wales, obviously, because the title is Welsh Moors and Feral Dragons. It is much more, I thought of it more as my Two Towers, where this is really where the walking journeying comes in. So if you like watching people journey and walk like in the Two Towers and you thought that was great, then you will probably like this book. There are sheep, there are new villains, there are new heroes, and there are more excellent middle-aged elderly women, and there is also magic. Ooh. So so dragons are not the only fantasy element that is coming into Mildred's life. We also have some magic coming in.
Well, I'm excited. I already own it.
Yes.
If I read another 500-page book by next week, I would be diving in.
Yes, unfortunately, Laura and I, immediately after reading this wonderful light fantasy, are reading the Greenbone saga, which is all about family mafia magic.
That's...
We got a breath of fresh air, and then it's back to the red wedding of it all. So,
and then the third book. The third one, I mean, the title is Miss Percy's Definitive Guide to London Magic and the Return of the Dragons. So, which is a mouthful, but it gives you a little taste of what will be going on. There's London, there's magic, and there's some dragons coming back, apparently. So,
and we're in the city now.
However you want to translate that. Yes.
I love that so much. We definitely want to thank you so much for coming on to talk. We've had a blast covering this book. We've had so much fun. It's
It's
delight.
really wonderful.
Everyone, if you've listened this far, like, well, you should have already bought it and read it because we've had a couple of spoilers.
Right.
But if you haven't bought it yet and this sounds interesting, go out and buy it right now because it's so wonderful. And for the listeners, what is something
Quenby,
right now?
Where can
yeah.
we find you first before we get into what you're reading and watching?
You can find me. I have a website, QuenbyOlson.com, basic there. I am on Twitter at Q Eisenacher. Honestly, I'm going to be very blunt and say my name is odd enough that if you just Google Quenby Olson, most places where I am will show up. It's not like I'm Bob Smith and 10,000 others show up. My daughter was even fascinated because she was with her friends and they looked up the name Quenby and my picture and website and things came up and they're, look, your mom's famous. But I was like, no, it's just there's not a lot of us, so.
Good name though.
So.
Thank you,
yeah,
Laura.
So those are the places you can find me.
Go follow her. Look at her website. She has all of her books up there. So review those. And then can you tell the listeners something you're reading, watching, and or enjoying right now?
I am reading. I just started. Oh goodness, I'm going to get the title wrong, and I have the book actually in my purse. I'm going to.
Grab it.
Sorry. It is The Fairy Bargains of Prospect Hill by Rowena Miller, which is, I don't know if it's going to be a cozy fantasy, but it's kind of like a kind of folklore fantasy. She's the author who wrote Torn and all of that has the sewing magic. Okay. And this one is like doing all these little fairy bargains to like making trades with the fairies to avoid having bad weather on a wedding, and then how the lives of this family is altered by that. And I'm only a couple chapters in, but it is so far very, very well written and very good. And so I like Rowena Miller's work, so I would definitely tell people to go and read that.
I will say that on Amazon, the trusted influencer that it is, it does rate it as a cozy fantasy. So
okay, I wasn't sure. I haven't gone too far into it yet, so I wasn't sure.
You're still on theme. It's okay.
Yeah. I didn't want to say, I think it's a cozy fantasy. Well, don't you know that everyone dies halfway through, Gwen?
And as you know, once you've written cozy fantasy, they never allow you to read anything else either. You have to stay
in that genre.
Must have some cottagecore in your house.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again for coming on. We appreciate you answering all of our very weird questions.
Thank you for having me. This was so much fun. And
thanks for writing these books.
Yeah,
I love them.
Thank you. Thank you.
So happy.
Thank you. You're giving me motivation to continue working on the third book.
Oh, good. That's what we were hoping for, because off mic, there were some worries that we would have come on and been like, we hated this book. Why did you write it?
I'll give you one more clue about book 3. I am right in the middle of a scene where they are about to meet with the Prince Regent.
Oh,
it's
about to get
we'll see how that goes. No. So we'll see how a dragon does with royalty.
Especially when it's based on your cat. All right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And thank you again, Quenby, for coming on the pod.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
And we're back. We totally went off air and definitely listened to the whole interview sitting together, staring into each other's eyes over Zoom.
Backstreet's back. All right.
But thank you. I just want to say thank you so much to Quenby Olson for coming on the podcast. Like, it was
such a fun interview. Like, it felt so conversational. It was not really our typical interview where we have like questions kind of like laid out. We went off the rails really and just started talking and asking questions, and it was so much fun.
And that was such like, I don't know. I feel like it shows her character so much, because we had like one question and like she answered it in such a fully formed way. We were both like, I guess our normal outline is totally out the window. And like we could kind of ask some of those questions as like wrap up questions, but no, we're just going to go down this like thematic rabbit hole with her.
Right.
And I think you and I had actually intended originally to like come back from the interview and do a deep dive into the themes and characters, and like afterwards we were both kind of like, I think we did.
I think we covered it.
Yeah. So I just like
We
it
got
was
it
such a,
straight from the horse's mouth.
she is as wonderful as an interviewee as she is a writer. So we really appreciate her taking the time. Like it was so great to do. And I just want to thank everyone else who's listened, who's purchased the book, who's read Miss Percy's Pocket Guide to the Care and Feeding of British Dragons. We couldn't do this without you guys. Intermission is some of our favorite things to do. So we appreciate everyone just taking this journey with us and, you know, taking these timeouts with us to read an indie author, because this is some of the best work we get to do as podcast hosts.
It's so fun to participate in these indie missions.
It's just so wonderful. And so we definitely want to highlight a couple more authors moving forward in between our series stuff. And make sure we're just getting everyone to read books that they never expected to be reading and books that might not be on their radar. So we just appreciate everyone. And we can't.
Thank you for voting. Thank you for the authors for even participating, because I know it can be difficult to be a part of something like this, but all the submissions are probably excellent.
I know.
Like Hannah said, we're going to try our hardest to get more of that content in between all of this too.
Right. And with further ado, we're heading out of Intermission and we will be peeking at the Greenbone saga.
Is that what our titles or series?
I think that was going to be what it is.
Saga?
Peeking on the Greenbone saga, because if you've read the books, you have No Peak Clan,
No Peak Clan,
and the Mountain Clan. So, do you have another one that you would prefer, Laura?
I don't have.
Okay,
I don't have a suggestion. I'm just.
I think it was
trying to clarify.
It was, yes. The mini series will be called Peeking at the Greenbone Saga, because there is a No Peak Clan and they're the family we mostly follow around. So we thought peeking spelled Peaking. So it's all the punniness of our pod and all the intricacies of us. So we will be going into
I was thinking, honestly, like we're reaching our peak. The Greenbone Saga.
I hope that's not what it was.
I thought that's the meaning you were going for.
Oh, no.
Honestly, I didn't think like looking. I was thinking you were intending that spelling.
I was thinking
like, this is our peak.
I was thinking peaking.
Gotcha.
I'm so
maybe
sorry
we
for
should
the confusion.
Maybe we should change the spelling then, because
we can make it peeking, Peeking, and just be like, if you know, you know, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, sure. I didn't know.
We can also do I think the other suggestion was boning up on the Greenbone saga.
That one seems a little raunchy, so
I know.
Maybe we'll stick with peeking.
But we will be covering through the first interlude next week, which is the first 17 chapters.
Okay, cool.
And so that will be what we're doing. There are 3 interludes in the book, but I figure we'll cover the first one because that's a lot of scene setting.
Sure.
And then we'll cover the second stuff.
I mean, short ways in, a lot of action already.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's a lot of like
Fonda, our martial artist queen, is not shying away from action.
The first chapter, people are getting murdered, people are like yelling, people are stealing jade. It's high
happening,
impact.
People.
So we'll be covering through the first interlude. And then we'll probably cut it up through the first interlude, the second interlude. And then we'll probably cover the last of the book, because I feel like there will be some action. And the third interlude we'll get on a faster pace after that. And these books are huge, so we will be covering them in 3 parts because Laura and I need breaks. So we'll be doing that.
Need a break.
And then characters and themes. And then I think we're going to be trying to get a couple more bonus episodes in between books now, just because these books are so large.
To give us some time to read, let's be real.
Like, I was like, wouldn't you like 2 weeks, Laura? And she was like, I really would. So
yeah,
I think we're going to try to do some bonus content, get some friends on, get some indie authors on. And so that's just kind of what to expect with the new season. We're switching things up again a little bit.
Changing gears, and you can't get tired of us because we're mixing it up so much.
And I mean, we've been doing this for a year and 2 months, 2 years,
2 years,
2 years and 2 months. So we're pretty much professionals now. So
just wait till we have ads. Then we're really going to be
gosh,
Big
we're
time.
just going to be. But guys, the only way to get us to get ads is to rate, review, and subscribe, which is a great way of getting our podcast name out there. You can also follow us on Instagram and Twitter and Hive, and even email us at OWWRpod. And if you want to email, add an @gmail.com to it. You could also give us a little bit of support by joining our Patreon, where we do a bonus episode every month for second favorite and extraordinary fans, and you get behind the scenes content if you're a casual listener. So you get all the things, and if you become an extraordinary fan, we read a book of your choice, where one of us will read a book and write a review on it, and you can look up those reviews on our blog. So just so much.
There's a lot of content out here.
We just give you all the content. The blog was going so well. It's going to be put up again. Hannah changed jobs this week, so she's in a little bit of transition.
Dare you put the blog on the back burner?
It's like, blog's never that consistent. I can take 2 weeks off, but I'll get back to it, guys. I promise. But yeah, we're just really excited for what is to come. And join us next week for peeking at the Greenbone Saga, but not peaking. Our podcast is not peaking.
Hopefully that's not the peak.
Now I'm wondering if that was the correct name, but we'll figure it out next week.
We'll figure it out as we go. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.